Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Most of you have probably watched the Thai movie How to Make Millions Before Grandma Dies. It's a movie that revolves around the antics of a young man trying to secure an inheritance from his grandmother before she dies. Now, while the movie is humorous and exaggerated, it does touch on the serious issue of inheritance and the lengths that some people might go to secure a share of inheritance. In reality, inheritance laws are there to ensure a fair and legal distribution of assets so as to prevent this kind of drama and deception that we see in the movie. In this video, we'll examine how and whether if you can inherit from a grandparent. When a grandparent dies, the distribution of the grandparent's assets under Singapore law depends on several factors, including whether they left a will. Let's start with a scenario where there is a will. So, if your grandparent left a will, their assets will be distributed according to the wishes as stated in the will. The will name the beneficiaries and the assets that they are to receive. If you are named in the will, then you are entitled to inherit as specified. So if you are a grandson and your grandmother states, I give all the monies in my POSB bank to my grandson Jonathan Tan, then you will receive that inheritance because you are specifically named in the will. However, if you are not mentioned in the will, you typically do not have a claim to the inheritance unless you challenge the will, which can be a complex legal process. And so don't even think of challenging your grandparents' will, because under the Inheritance Family Provisions Act, only a spouse or disabled child has the right to claim against a deceased if the will or the Intestate Succession Act does not provide for him adequately. Now, what happens if your grandparent dies without a will? This is known as dying intestate. In such cases, the distribution of the assets is governed by the Intestate Succession Act of Singapore. The Intestate Succession Act outlines a specific order of priority for inheritance when a person dies without a will. You can read Section 7 of the ISA. Essentially, grandchildren are not directly listed as primary beneficiaries. The main rule that you should take note of is that if a dead person dies with a spouse and children, the estate is divided equally between the spouse and the children. So if a man dies leaving a wife and 5 children, then the wife gets 50% and each of the 5 children get 10% each. If a man dies leaving a wife and only 2 children, the wife gets 50% and each child gets 25%. You should also note that if any of the children of the deceased is also dead, the dead child will also inherit, except that it will go to his estate, i.e. is distributed according to his will or the Intestate Succession Act. So, if a married man dies leaving a wife and 4 children, his wife gets half of the assets and each child gets 12.5% of the assets. Why 12.5? Because the other half is equally among the children. So 50% divided by 4 children is 12.5%. So let's call this, the man has a wife and 4 children. One of the children is John. John died before the husband, the man died, okay? And let's call him John. John has a living wife and 1 son. Then the 12.5% which John would have gotten if he was alive would be split equally between John's wife and his son. But if John's wife is also dead, then John's son will get the entire 12.5% of what John would have received if John was alive. So, if your grandma dies and your grandpa is still alive and they have 4 children, then grandpa gets half of the assets and your mother or father, who is one of grandma's children, gets 12.5%. If grandpa is also dead, that means he died before your grandma, that means the estate, that means grandma's estate will be split equally amongst the 4 children. So each child will get 25% of the assets. But if one of grandma's children who happens to be your father is also dead, that means died before grandma, and your father's wife, that means your mother, is also dead, that means your father was supposed to inherit the 25%, but it goes under his estate, and because both parents are dead, it will go to you. The 25% will go to you. To conclude, yes, the movie is true, and you can potentially inherit from your grandmother if you are in her good books, and she actually executes a will specifically naming you as a beneficiary and leaving some assets to you. The second scenario is that if both your parents are dead and one of them is a child of grandma. So that's all for today's video. I hope you found this information useful. If you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover in future videos, please leave a comment below. Thanks for watching.